I do have to ask about the breaking news today.
Sure.
Your chief competitor, the front runner right now, Donald Trump, says he was informed that he is the target of special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and Mr. Trump has until Thursday to report to the grand jury. If Jack Smith has evidence of criminality, should Donald Trump be held accountable?
So here's the problem. This country is going down the road of criminalizing political differences, and I think that's wrong. Alvin Bragg stretched a statute in Manhattan to be able to try to target Donald Trump. Most people, even people on the left, acknowledge if that wasn't Trump, that case would not have likely been brought against a normal civilian. And so you have a situation where the Department of Justice, FBI, have been weaponized against people they don't like. And the number one example of that happened to be against Donald Trump with the Russia collusion. That was not a legitimate investigation. That was being done to try to drive Trump out of office. And so what I've said as president, my job is to restore a single standard of justice, to end weaponization of these agencies. We're going to have a new FBI director on day one. We're going to have big changes at the Department of Justice. Americans across the political spectrum need to have confidence that what is going on is based on the rule of law, not based on what political tribe you're in. And then the second thing I would say is this country needs to have a debate about the country's future. If I'm the nominee, we'll be able to focus on President Biden's failures, and I'll be able to articulate a positive vision for the future. I don't think it serves us good to have a presidential election focused on what happened 4 years ago in January. And so I want to focus on looking forward. I don't want to look back. I do not want to see him. I hope he doesn't get charged. I don't think it'll be good for the country. But at the same time, I've got to focus on looking forward, and that's what we're going to do.
Jack Smith has prosecuted Democrats, too. I mean, he prosecuted, or at least was part of the prosecution of Senator Menendez, Senator John Edwards. Are you saying that if he finds evidence of criminality, he should not charge Donald Trump anyway?
What I'm saying is, when you're going after somebody on the other side of the political spectrum, if you're stretching statutes to try to criminalize maybe political disagreements, that is wrong. Now, look, this is all speculation, but I think we've gone down the road in this country of trying to criminalize differences in politics rather than saying, okay, you don't like somebody, then defeat them in the election rather than trying to use the justice system. So we don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you with the Bragg one, that was stretching criminal law. The evidence of criminality was very weak, and even if that existed, other people would not have been charged under those circumstances. That's the problem.
So what you just saw there is DeSantis totally slink out of answering the question like he normally tends to do. And while it might be a fact that the Alvin Bragg case is not as strong of a case and is not as potentially perilous for Trump as the Jack Smith indictment or any of the future indictments that we believe are coming. But what Tapper is asking him about is what he thinks about the merits of the Jack Smith indictment and whether or not, if there's evidence that Trump committed a crime in the retaining of classified documents and mishandling them, what should the outcome be, in DeSantis' opinion? And the only thing he's got is to talk about a totally separate case that has nothing to do with the Jack Smith indictment. So I don't understand what the point of bringing up Alvin Bragg is, other than to basically use that one case that, again, might not be as strong as some of the other ones, and to just use that to totally justify any future wrongdoing or any future indictments as being politically motivated and a witch hunt, which we obviously know is not true. And the reason Trump is being investigated is because there's evidence that a crime was committed in the withholding of classified documents after he left office. So totally just a non-answer here from DeSantis. And yeah, I'm not sure what he thinks he's getting at, because he didn't ask about the Alvin Bragg indictment. He's asking about the Jack Smith indictment. Next, we're going to look at here DeSantis on ripping the woke out of the military, and really just how DeSantis disregards any information or any data that goes against his little bubble and his little worldview that he lives in.
Oh, I hear you. Recruitment, without question, is a problem. The Army did this survey. I'll give you a copy of it if you want. They haven't released it, but I got my hands on a copy. And it surveyed people, I think 16 to 28 barriers to service, and beyond the ones such as don't want to die, don't want to be injured, don't want to be away from my family. The biggest issues were the number 2 issue: women and racial or ethnic minorities are discriminated against in the Army. Wokeness is listed here, but it's only number 9. So that would suggest that wokeness is not as big.
Well, but I think there's an issue about, like, not everyone really knows what wokeness is. I mean, I've defined it, but a lot of people who rail against wokeness can't even define it. And so I think it's a sense of, this is not something that's holding true to the core martial values that make the military unique. And I can tell you, the veterans, you don't have to look far and wide. Go to a VFW hall, go to an American Legion. There's huge amount of concern about the direction that the military is going with all this. And here's the thing, things like DEI and all that stuff, it hasn't worked in other aspects of society. It very well may be on the constitutional chopping block in light of the Supreme Court's decision on racial discrimination in higher education. And so it's not a model that I think is going to be successful in the military. And so we're going to do what has been successful in the past, and I think you're going to see better recruiting as a result.
I just love this. Tapper has data that's saying that people that are saying that they don't want to sign up for the military, they're not really concerned about wokeness at all, as much as a bunch of other different reasons, including minorities and black people being discriminated against, and women as well being discriminated against in the military. But DeSantis isn't interested in that. He's interested in peddling his cultural war nonsense. So he's going to always believe that the problem with the military is that it's too woke, even when the data that Tapper is trying to get him to listen to goes totally against that. And this is really indicative of how these conversations go with people who are dug in on their correctness on the right, because they don't care about data. They don't care about statistics. Their worldview is how they see things being, and any data that goes against it, well, the institution that ran the data is probably woke too. And DeSantis even says, oh, of course the Pentagon's going to say that they did a good job, and of course the Pentagon says that they're doing great with recruitment. Earlier in the interview, it's not in this clip, but it's just totally indicative of his mind state when it comes to statistics that go against his worldview. And he goes on to say, oh, well, I know what the real woke is, and some people can't even define woke, but I've defined it, and I know what it is, and I know what I'm going against. But again, people that are being asked, why are you not signing up for the military? Wokeness is not one of the issues. So here's an example here of DeSantis making an issue out of nothing and trying to stoke the cultural flames against LGBTQ people and against abortion rights, because he sees it as being politically advantageous. Nothing to do with helping the military be better, nothing to do with helping us be more prepared to fight against our adversaries. None of that. It's all about peddling his cultural nonsense every single chance he can get. Next up here, we're going to be looking at his response on the Taiwan issue and just how nonsensical it is, because Joe Biden is doing exactly what he recommends as being the best thing to do to deter Xi Jinping from potentially invading Taiwan, but he still has a bone to pick with our current stance towards the Ukraine-Russian conflict. Really strange, really strange.
What do you say to the argument that Xi Jinping is watching the U.S. response to Ukraine to game out how the U.S. would respond if China invaded Taiwan? President Biden has said that U.S. forces would defend Taiwan if China invaded. Would you do the same? Would you order the U.S. military to defend Taiwan?
Well, two things. So first, how does China view this? I mean, it's somewhat speculative. I think what they would like to see in Russia-Ukraine is a multi-year stalemate and quagmire where the West is pouring in $100 billion, another $200 billion of weapons. Our stocks continue to decline. They don't really care about the Russians. Russia will be more dependent on China as a result of that. So I think that's what Xi would like to see ideally. Now, in terms of Taiwan, That is a significant interest of the United States. Taiwan is a strong ally. Taiwan is important for us economically and for a variety of other reasons. Also, a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan successfully would have big reverberations in the Asia Pacific. But our policy is going to be very simple. We're going to deter that from happening. China respects hard power. If you have hard power, if you have strong alliances with the Japanese, I visited there a few months ago. The Koreans and the Japanese are getting along now. They never used to get along because they both see the threat posed by China. So we're going to work together. We're going to be much stronger. We're going to project power, and we're going to deter that from happening.
Let's talk about some issues here in the United States. You've been asked by this by a number of members of conservative media, and you have yet to give a yes or no answer. You recently signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Yes or no, would you support that as a nationwide ban?
So I said I'm pro-life. I will be a pro-life president, and we will support pro-life policies. At the same time, I look at what's going on in the Congress, and I don't see them making very much headway. I think the danger from Congress is if we lose the election, they're going to try to nationalize abortion up until the moment of birth. And in some liberal states, you actually have post-birth abortions. And I think that that's wrong. Also, with respect to the military thing that we talked about, we're going to reverse the abortion tourism policy in the Department of Defense. They're actually paying people to go and get abortions with American tax dollars as part of the military. They won't even pay you. You lose a loved one. You don't get that type of time off to be able to go to do funerals. And so we're going to continue to stand for life, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that.
So you see DeSantis here kind of try to shift the narrative to, no, it's the Democrats that are actually extreme on this, and it's the Democrats who want to rip babies out of the mother's stomach 1 minute prior to her giving birth, which, if you look at statistics, you'll know that such a small percentage of abortions happen that late into a pregnancy. And it's usually because there's some sort of medical complication that occurs that forces people to have an abortion. And he basically, in my opinion, just said yes. Yes, he would support a 6-week abortion ban. Did you hear that, suburban women? And did you hear that, women across the United States? DeSantis is a pro-life president, meaning he's going to support pro-life positions, meaning that if a bill hit his desk that was banning abortion after 6 weeks, he would likely sign it. Not likely, he would certainly sign it. But you can't say that because the statistics all show that Americans think that Republicans are extreme on this issue. Over 60% of people support women's right to a legal abortion, and even Republicans, a large, not majority, but 35-40% or so of Republicans even think that abortion should be a legal right. So I'm not sure where DeSantis thinks how he's benefiting his campaign going to the right of Trump on this issue, because it's not going to be winning him any voters in the middle, and the Trump voters aren't going to go over to him just on a abortion policy. Okay, Trump voters are supporting Trump for a whole bunch of other reasons than a specific policy. So yeah, I just don't know what this strategy is. Again, you get a complete non-answer here of I'm pro-life, but we're going to stop the Democrats from being baby killers. Dude, women's abortion rights are being stripped away across the country, and this is something that people really, really have the right to know where you stand on as you're heading into the presidential election. So just totally a spineless answer here from Ron DeSantis, but not much else is to be expected. Next clip, we're going to be looking at Ron DeSantis' response to the state of his campaign and why he thinks his campaign is fledgling. Let's take a look.
So this issue gets into the state of the race because some of your supporters are disappointed that your campaign has yet to catch fire the way they would want in terms of polling. One Republican pollster, one who is sympathetic to you, I was asking her about your campaign, and she said she thought the issue was you bumped up at the beginning because Republican voters saw you as a more electable conservative like Trump, Trump without the baggage. But then they say as you go further and further to the right on some of these divisive social issues that could alienate moderates, suburban moms, et cetera, Republican voters see you as less and less electable. What do you say to that analysis?
Well, I don't think it's true. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I took a state that had been a 1-point state, and we won it by 20 percentage points, 1.5 million votes. Our bread and butter were people like suburban moms. We're leading a big movement for parents' rights, to have the parents be involved in education, school choice, get the indoctrination out of schools. And of course, there's bread and butter issues that matter too. Inflation, more economic opportunity. Florida's economy is ranked #1 of all 50 states. We've worked hard to make that happen. Crime, you see crime in all these different communities that is now even going into suburbs in some areas. So I think that there's a lot of things. I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is I was getting a lot of media attention at the time, coming off the victory. I had to do my job as governor with my legislative session, and we had a great legislative session. We did a lot of great things, actually things that appeal to huge majorities of the population. So I think that analysis is wrong. But I had to do that. And so I was basically taking fire really nonstop since then, because a lot of people view me as a threat. I think the left views me as a threat because they think I'll beat Biden and actually deliver on all this stuff. And then, of course, people that have their allegiances within the allegiances in the Republican side, have gone after me. But the reality is, this is a state-by-state process. I'm not running a campaign to try to juice, whatever we are in the national polls. I mean, whatever we did in the CNN compared, whatever, it's fine. I'm definitely doing better than everybody else.
But it's state by state, obviously.
It's state by state.
Right.
So we're focused on building an organization. You got to get people to come out in the middle of January in Iowa to caucus for you. That requires an organization, it requires to know where those votes are. Now, that is not going to make the same type of splash as if you were trying to run ads nationally or do those other things. And so we've been making really good progress. I think this weekend was really good in terms of the family leader and some of the other things we were doing in Iowa. Of course, we're here in South Carolina. We're going to do a lot in New Hampshire. But that's going to be our focus, focusing on those early states, continuing to build our coalitions and going.
So first off, I think DeSantis should avoid saying the word pudding under any circumstances, given some past stories about him we've heard involving him and pudding. But again, it's a total cop-out to just say that winning Florida, oh, well, any concerns about my campaign nationally, it's not a big deal because we won in Florida and we're really popular in Florida. And guess what, dude? The makeup of voters and what issues people specifically care about and just the demographics and education level and the income level of voters across the country differs vastly from that of just Florida. Now, you can make a counter argument of, well, DeSantis, Florida is the only place that a type of candidate like you that has the policies that you have would have any success at all. So if you weren't running in Florida, you would never even be the governor in the first place. So I don't understand all of this reference put to Florida, like as if Florida anoints the president of the United States. No, we run a primary in all 50 states, vote, and every American has the opportunity to vote. America's a lot bigger of a place than Florida. And for him to just blame the media for basically his downfalls and, oh, well, it's basically, he makes the argument of everything that I'm experiencing that's a detriment to my campaign right now. It's all the media's fault because the media sees him as a threat or something, or sees him as some sort of obstacle for Biden to get over. Dude, you have to win the Republican nomination first, and Trump is running away with it as of right now. So how is it the media's fault that they report on your policies and they report on how crazy and outlandishly bad they are? And that's the media's fault that they're reporting on your campaign and reporting on what you're saying during your speeches? It's just it's an excuse of somebody who's a loser. It's an excuse of somebody who just really doesn't have it. Doesn't have what it takes to win a national primary, especially against a figure like a Donald Trump. So the last clip we'll look at here is DeSantis's response to climate change and how it should inform our foreign policy and and our domestic military policy.
Last question about your military policy, because your new military policy says that Pentagon should never prioritize climate politics over national security. But this week we heard from the Associate Director of Military Affairs for the CIA, who told a room full of National Guard leaders and allies from other countries that climate change supercharges almost every other global threat because of refugees, because of conflicts, because of all sorts of reasons. What's your response to that, the idea that climate politics isn't about politics, it's about national security?
Well, here's the thing. How are you going to equip your fighting force to win? Are you going to put those considerations in? Or are you going to create the most lethal force available? I can tell you, China is not going to use those considerations. If they need to burn more coal to defend their country, they are going to burn more coal to defend their country. So I just don't think it should be a factor in terms of how we project power in this country. Focus on how lethal we can be and focus on getting the mission done. I don't want to force the Department of Defense to be using electric vehicles. I just don't think that that's something that makes any sense.
So he says China is not going to have any concern about how their military is affecting the environment. But dude, China is the #1 polluter in the entire planet. Okay, and they've made some progress in recent years, including in solar technology, where they've now passed the U.S. in raw solar output, which is shameful, by the way. We should be #1 on solar output. But that doesn't change the fact that China's military is, not their military, I'm sorry, excuse me, their country is the #1 polluting country in the world, and their military contributes to that. Not only that, but the most polluting apparatus of the U.S. is our military, and it's documented. It's well documented. Just look at all the burn pits that were happening during the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and how many veterans are now having cancerous effects due to these burn pits, and the environmental effects are being studied as well. And it's disastrous. So for DeSantis to not have any concern about how our military affects the environment, or to use China as an example of, well, we should be more like China in terms of their polluting, because they don't really have any qualms about their military polluting. Well, let's set an example. Let's be better than China. Let's have an example of this is how a modern society's military, that is, works in whatever way it can to reduce environmental damage. Because as you guys know, climate change and the effects of it have been getting worse and worse and worse. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just go outside. If you live in anywhere in the Southwest, Southern, mid-central United States right now, just go outside, and you don't have to have me tell you about how badly the effects of climate change are affecting our world as well as our country. That's all I got for you guys in this one. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you think about Ron DeSantis' interview with Jake Tapper, and I'll be sure to catch you in the next video. All right, peace.